Hello world, we are going to talk about human sexuality for this last health video. So we made it to the end, we finally talk about sex. So I thought we'd start this off. Life is sexually transmitted. And that is an awfully cute little baby. Yes, let's remember before we get into sex, let's remember what's the whole point. It's to make babies. We've already talked about babies, talked about how that happens. Now we're going to talk about more particulars, the sex part, but life is sexually transmitted. So these are the topics we're going to cover today. Abstinence, some notes on sex. We're going to talk about birth control and contraceptives. We're going to talk about unplanned pregnancy options, consent, pornography, and legal issues. So let's talk about abstinence first. There is no such thing as safe sex, only safer sex. So we talked about that when we talked about STDs, diseases you can get from sex. And I said, can you get a disease from doing anything sexually? And people should have said, yes, kissing you can get a disease. Okay? There's no such thing as safe sex in terms of disease transmission. And there is no such thing as safe sex outside a committed, safe, permanent relationship. Now, we talked about sex during our relationship section on intimacy, the video on relationship fundamentals that covered intimacy. And I talked about how sex is supposed to be the final seal upon intimacy that the two people already share in every other area. That is the purpose. It's supposed to, glue you together to the other person. Seal the deal. It's not meant to create intimacy where there is no trust, where there is no communication, where there is no boundaries. That's not the purpose of sex. I had found one study that talked specifically about abstinence, and I put a quote at the bottom. This study showed that those who waited to initiate sexual intimacy, so instead of jumping into bed, first thing they start dating each other and they jump into bed together, if they waited, they found longer and more positive outcomes in those relationships. While those who, couldn't help themselves, quote unquote, they chose not to avoid sex, reported that their dalliances, dalliance is an old-fashioned word for sexual relationship, struggled to last more than 2 years. So basically, if you jump into bed with someone and try to skip to the end, collect $200, hit go, without doing any of the hard work of building a relationship, all that really happens is that you doom your relationship to end. Because you jump into intimacy and sharing, and so you open up a world of pain, potentially, without having put in anything positive into the relationship that will help you work through those things so that when they do come, you can manage it. And that is why abstinence, not having sex with a partner who you are not committed to, is the best way to go. You can still have fun with someone, you can still date someone, you can still hang out, but to actually commit to a lifelong, permanent relationship with them, that is when sex is best. So, I want you to know sex is good. Sex is healthy. Sex is normal and natural for committed adults. Notice I said adults, not children. Adults in a healthy relationship. This is a good thing for people to be doing. It really is. Trust me. Okay? Happily married. It's a good thing. Here's a secret. Most of the married adults you know are having sex at least once a week, usually, according to statistics. So, if they're still married, they're probably sexually content, and it's a good thing for their relationship. And pretty much every species on Earth, almost every, has sexual reproduction. That means fish are having sex, frogs are having sex, cows are having sex, horses are having sex. Sex is probably the most common thing to be happening around the world at any particular time of the timeline. So, people try to hush it up or whatever. It's it's part of life, okay? There's nothing to be ashamed of, nothing to be embarrassed about. It is part of a healthy, normal life. So one of the things I kind of thought I would let you guys know is that you think for young people tend to think sex is for you. You're young, you're healthy, you have a very high sex drive. All those hormones that are getting triggered in massive doses, the testosterone and everything is skyrocketing. And you probably have the highest sex drive right now than you will ever have in your life. So you think sex is for you. Actually, sex is the glue that keeps two people together for the long term. When you don't like the way they chew their food and their breath stinks in the morning, and if they could only learn to pick up their socks, sex keeps you going. It's the fun part that keeps two people glued together. When you've got other factors like tiredness and stress, kids, regular sex keeps the relationship healthier and happier. Also, in case you've never thought about this before, the more often you have sex with the same person, the better you both get at it. And so you both get better and better at having sex with each other, and then you have better and better and better sex. It's practice makes perfect. So you have some very strong arguments here for lifelong sexual commitments. One of the surveys I found said that in committed relationships, women are almost twice as likely to climax during sex. So 75% are actually having orgasms compared to casual hookups. Okay, so it actually is hard work for a woman to orgasm. It's difficult. And the man she's having sex with needs to know how to help her reach orgasm. It needs to be sensitive, etc. And the longer you know each other, the better you get at it, especially using communication. That felt good, that didn't feel good. If you ever touch me like that again, I'll punch you. That kind of communication, very important. Okay? In committed relationships, that's what's happening, and that's why you have this high orgasm rate. Whereas a casual hookup, neither of you know the other person. Yeah, you might be feeling randy, but that doesn't mean you're going to be any good at sex. I mean, you might think you're especially good at it, especially if you're drunk. That doesn't make you good at it. And the truth is in the numbers. It just doesn't happen for women in these casual hookups. Sex is good. Faith traditions, I would venture to say, as far as I know, every faith tradition that I know about say sex is good. It was created to be good. And as a side note, faithful and religious monogamous partners, so people who are only having sex with each other, who have a religion, doesn't matter which one, that they find meaningful in their life, they report across the board in all these statistics the highest levels of actual sex happening and the highest satisfaction levels with the sex that is happening. So, if you want to, there's a stereotype in our culture that, religious people go to church or go to mosque or go to, the synagogue. They're the stodgy old guys and they must, have completely nothing going on in the bedroom. Turns out, statistically, they're the ones with the most going on in the bedroom, and they're enjoying it the most. So yeah, there's that for you. Okay, so let's talk about some notes on the actual sex act itself. So I'm going to talk not about creativity or blah, blah, blah. I'm just going to talk about the actual things that's happening here. So the biomechanics, the first thing you need to know is that the most natural position, which is either the woman on top of the man or the man on top of the woman. Okay, I'm only talking about heterosexual sex during this. I'm not going anywhere near homosexual or any other kind. Okay, so heterosexual, just so you know. The most natural positions with either a man or a woman on top is also the one in which both partners are most likely to orgasm. And the reason why is that women have what's called the G-spot, which is, the sensors that trigger her into full orgasm. Those nerves are right under the lip of the cervix. If you remember from my last video on how babies are made, when the cervix is touched by the man's penis, that's what triggers the uterus to contract. And when the uterus contracts, that is a female orgasm. The whole point of the female orgasm, the uterine orgasm, is to bring the cervix down to the entrance of the vagina in order to make it easier for sperm to get into it. That's the whole point. That's what feels best. When the woman's body gets ready to accept sperm, that's when she has the biggest orgasm. And that position, that the way that that happens best is if a woman and man are connecting in the most natural position, which is face to face. Okay, for humans. Now, dogs obviously do not do it face to face. For humans, our bodies require face to face positioning for the least amount of discomfort and pain for the woman. Men tend to be a little bit more flexible, but women really need to have comfortable positions, or sex can actually be extremely painful. And if you're trying to be enjoying something that's intimate and close, you don't want one person like crying in pain, right? That's not sex. That's abuse. That's horrible. So women can have two kinds of orgasms, like I mentioned. You can have an orgasm for a woman if the clitoris, which is on the front of the woman's body, is stimulated, and only the clitoris is stimulated. That's called a clitoral orgasm, or the full uterine orgasm. Men only get one kind of orgasm, and that's when they shoot out the sperm ready to impregnate the woman. And so the reason why the clitoris is in the front of the woman's body is because that is the position where sex usually happens that makes babies. And so the clitoris is there. The only reason for the clitoris, it has no other purpose in life except to make sex feel good for the woman. That's it. It doesn't do anything else down there. Nothing. It's designed to make sex feel good. And so, people who believe that humans are created by a designer, then if you believe people are created by a designer, you have to also assume that designer wanted women to enjoy sex, because there's no other point for the clitoris. That's what it's for. Okay, mutuality. This is really important. Both male and female brains are wired to be aroused, sexually aroused, at the signs that the other person is becoming aroused. So this is a positive feedback loop. When a man sees a woman's, let's say her eyes dilate and her lips start turning pinker and her breath changes, these are all signs, physical signs of arousal in a woman. When a man sees that, his brain responds with an automatic, the penis goes up. Okay, getting ready for sex. Women also, they become more aroused when their partner is aroused. This comes from sounds, visual cues, smells, touch. We are designed to want the other person to be enjoying themselves. And that's when it works the best. Healthy sex must be mutually enjoyable. All right? Also, emotional aspects of sex. The brain is the biggest sex organ of the body. You can read that anywhere. It's in all the sex books. We are not animals. Our brains are our biggest sex organ. We can use them in order to even just make ourselves, aroused without even needing any physical input. Animals can't do that. Okay? We feel sexual affection and desire for someone when we have an emotional attachment to them. Especially true for women. Women then tend to need to be emotionally engaged before sex in order to enjoy it. And men, after sex, after the sex act, men generally get this afterglow of love and all these oogly googly, warm, squishy feelings for their partner after sex. And so both partners have their needs met during sex as long as they are in a committed, safe, emotional, intimate relationship. And that is when sex works the best. Okay? So this is why hookups don't work for women. This is a stranger, it's like, this stranger's putting this random thing in my body and I'm supposed to be enjoying it? No, that's not how women work. It is a very strange thing to be doing. Sex is strange, okay? But It works the best in a committed lifetime relationship where you can both laugh about how weird it is and enjoy it and enjoy each other. I want to emphasize as we talk about this is be considerate. Okay. So there's a lot of things that I don't need to talk to you about sex. If you have questions, you can talk to other people. The one thing I want you to know is that you need to be considerate of your partner. Okay. So imagine we're going to a buffet, you and your partner going to a buffet. It would be rude if you went to the buffet, sat down, stuffed your face for 20 seconds like a pig, and then said, "Okay, we're going now," and your partner hasn't even eaten. That would be rude. In the same way, don't be a pig when it comes to sex, okay? It is an act two people do together for mutual satisfaction, not just one person. And one other thing to note, it is nice to try different foods in this, analogy here, but there's nothing new under the sun. The Bible has a whole book about sex, and that was written 3,000 years ago. The Indian culture has the Kama Sutra, which is another whole book written about sex. You will never invent anything new in sex. And that's okay. You don't have to be, going bravely where no one's ever gone before. No, people have gone there, tried that, been there, done that. In a committed relationship, it doesn't matter what other people are doing. You need to find what works best for you and your partner. And that's all that's important. Find a few meals you both enjoy. Meals, of course, being in quotes. Like, steak and potatoes, right? The steak and potatoes of sex. And, mix it up a little bit, but basically stick with what works for both of you, and you will be hitting 75% satisfaction or better. Sex is not difficult. And it's not challenging and it's not complicated. Just stick to what works for both of you and don't worry about anybody else. Don't involve anybody else. And it'll work, okay? It's not difficult. Now, there are problems with sex. Now, we talked a little bit about problems with getting pregnant for men and women. And then there's also physical problems for enjoying sex with both genders. I'm not going to go into the wide range of physical problems because, it's not really in the scope of this class. I do want to mention, since we've already talked about trauma, that emotional problems, usually related to trauma, especially past physical trauma that involves sexual abuse, um, if that's true for one or both partners in the sexual relationship, the sex buffet is going to have to get shut down for repairs or sometimes shut down entirely. If it happened to someone at a very young age, but they don't get married for 20 more years after that, it's still going to shut her down. And that's one of the side effects of trauma. We talked about trauma and trauma memory and triggers. A lot of women push things deep, deep down inside, or men, because men can be abused as children too. Push things deep, deep, deep down inside and then never think about it again. But then what if you get married and you want to enjoy this new relationship you have? And then you find you can't because when they touch you, you have a trigger flashback to some horrible memory. Considering the stats on the numbers of women, at least, who've been abused by age 18, again, the stats on men are also horrific. It is very likely that you or your partner will be in the position of being either trying to heal from past trauma or needing to help the other person heal from past trauma. And this can be, I put it in big caps, because it can be extremely painful process. One person may have to let go of their needs being met at all for a period of time. I encourage you, if you've already suffered this kind of trauma, to seek help and healing before you ever enter into a sexual relationship for your own sake, but also for your future partners, because it's ugly what things can happen and there's no reason to not seek healing when healing can happen and it can make sex good again. Now, let's talk about avoiding pregnancy while sexually active. Most people want to be sexually active. Most people don't want crying babies. So there's only a few methods, really. There's two methods that do not involve chemicals. One is called pulling out, or the technical name is actually onanism, and the second is the rhythm method. So onanism, there's a story about Onan from the Bible. He was supposed to go to his sister-in-law because his brother was dead and she needed a kid to take care of her in her old age. The biblical law said that the next brother in line was supposed to have sex with the widow and let her have a baby from her body so that that baby would protect her and take care of her. Because remember, they didn't have old folk homes back then. If you didn't have kids, you were basically destitute and alone when you died. And there's a story in the Bible where Onan was supposed to go into his sister-in-law and do this for her, but every time he did, he would spill his semen on the ground. So that's the pulling out method. And of course, in the Bible story, he gets struck dead for this thing because he's refusing to provide for his sister-in-law, which was a sin. So pulling out, I'm not saying pulling out is a sin. Pulling out is the process by which you pull out after you've engaged sexually and the semen goes elsewhere besides inside the woman's body. Now, this is not a very good way of avoiding pregnancy because, as we talked about, the stuff that comes out before the orgasm does have sperm in it, so it's not terribly effective. Also, you have the rhythm method, which is where the female tracks her fertility and you only have sex when the woman is outside the fertile window. You can also combine the rhythm method with a barrier method like a condom, so that you either practice abstinence when a woman is fertile, or you use a condom or whatever when she's fertile and use the rhythm method the rest of the time. Now, here are the contraceptives that are possible. You have barrier methods. There are male condoms. Most people are familiar with male condoms, but there are female condoms. There's the diaphragm, which is a rubber kind of ring cap thing that goes inside the woman. Same thing with the cervical cap or sponge. And now those get coated with spermicide and they get put up inside the woman. So when sex does happen, the spermicide kills all the sperm. Unfortunately, that method, the barrier method, it is the problem with most people can't enjoy sex very much with it. The spermicide problem is that spermicide is a nasty old chemical that actually irritates the inside of the woman. So there's that too. Then you have chemical birth control. That is where for a woman's chemical birth control, her hormone levels are kept below the spike required to ovulate. Unfortunately, by keeping her in this kind of semi-pregnant, semi-not pregnant state of hormones, it is a problem for her in many other ways. So blood clots, cancer, strokes, heart attacks, depression, weight gain, DVT is another thing. These have all been linked to the pill, as it's called. So that's a problem too, right? Then you have IUDs, intrauterine devices. What these are actual physical devices placed inside a woman's uterus, and it irritates the lining of the uterus so that even if a fertilized egg tries to implant, it will be shucked out with the rest of the body during menstruation. The downside to these is they can migrate. They can actually puncture the uterus, leave the uterus, and migrate into other parts of the body. And the woman has to have surgery to have it removed. That's not good. And finally, you have permanent surgical infertility. That's where you have your vasectomy for men, or for women, you either tie the tubes, the fallopian tubes, or the whole uterus is removed. And that creates permanent sterility. Now let's talk about unplanned pregnancy options. There's only three. Unplanned parenting. You are an unplanned parent. You got pregnant when you weren't planning to. You keep the baby. So you parent your own child. Adoption. That's where you're an unplanned parent and you choose to allow someone else to parent your baby. You adopt your baby out to someone else who can take care of your baby if you feel like you cannot. And the third option is abortion. Kill the baby. This is an option. I don't personally agree with it, but it is There are only three options. You have the baby and take care of it, have the baby and give it to someone else, or you kill the baby. Now let's talk about consent. Consent is yes. It's not a or maybe, let me think about it. Okay, consent is yes. Do you want to have sex? Yes. Okay, there's consent. How about do you want to have sex? I'm not sure if we're there yet in our relationship. That's a no. It's just a nice no. Okay? The yes is yes, and that's all yes is. And nothing else is yes unless it's a yes. So being in a relationship with someone is not consent. This is going back to our boundaries. You give people access to your body. Let's say you allow your boyfriend or your girlfriend to hug you or kiss you. That doesn't mean they get to put their fingers into any part of your body that they want. That doesn't mean they get to tie you up like a dog. That doesn't mean anything. It just means you've allowed them that particular access. Being in a relationship is not consent. They have to actually consent verbally. Okay? Consent is saying yes right then, that time. Not, I said yes 6 months ago, so now, now you have to keep doing it with me. No, that's not how consent works. You can always say no. Let's say you said yes last night and you want to say no this morning. That's okay. It's your body. You're allowed to. That's your boundaries. Married people can say no too. Your body is your body no matter what legal, contractual, covenantal relationship you are in with the person. It's still your body. You can always say no. So consent means yes. Now I'm going to talk about pornography very shortly. Pornography is degradation. If you remember, degradation is making someone less than human. Pornography turns human people into less than human, turns them into tools, turns them into slaves, turns them into objects, not people. There are ties to the sex slave trade, to child abuse, and violence against women. Pornography and the sex slave trade are like hand in glove. Same thing with child abuse, same thing with violence against women. Pornography convinces a lot of men, given the sheer amount of domination, rape pornography that's out there, that women like being raped. And again, I'll have to say it again. I've said it before. Women do not like being raped. Okay? If you ever wonder yourself, I wonder if this person wants to be raped, the answer is no. Okay? Nobody wants to be raped. Rape, by its very nature, is non-consensual. The person doesn't want it. They don't like it. They don't need it. So, pornography tends to make men think the opposite of that, though. It's all faked. It's all video cameraed. It's not real. They don't want it. They're just doing it because they're drug addicts or they're getting paid. That's all. Also, pornography is damaging to the person who's watching the porn. Okay, so neurons that fire together wire together. Just like every other addictive substance, pornography floods your brain with dopamine. And that happening over and over and over changes the actual neural pathways inside your brain. Your brain physically changes when you watch pornography. And it makes you unable to enjoy it the more you do it. So you need more and more and more of it to get high. This is why you can become erectile dysfunction as a man. You can't get it up if you watch too much porn. Your brain's like, I'm done. I don't believe you anymore. Okay? This is also why you have pornography that if people are addicted to porn, they start looking up harder and harder and nastier and more gutter-like kinds of porn. Because it's nasty, but the good stuff that they liked at the beginning isn't enough for them anymore because their brain is reacting to the addiction and fighting back. That is your brain trying to save itself from addiction. And finally, pornography has incredible relational damage. You might think, I'm not married, I'm not in a relationship with anybody, I can do whatever I want. No, that's not how it works. What you do today affects you tomorrow. You get yourself addicted to sex pornography today, you're still going to be addicted when you try to have a good relationship with someone tomorrow. Except now you're hurting them too by what you've allowed yourself to look at. There's so much that's bad about pornography within a relationship. It damages your sex drive, it damages expectations. Most people who have been involved in porn cannot enjoy normal sex. And it's linked to very high rates of divorce. If I asked 100 people getting divorced how many of them had porn as an issue, pretty much probably 99% would say, yep. Finally, a lot of people that I've heard talk about this, they say, well, I'm not hurting anyone but myself. Well, one thing, you're right, you are hurting yourself. Like I mentioned, the brain changes alone. That is hurting yourself. Um, Future relational damages, that's hurting yourself as well as the partner. But the thing is, anytime you view pornography, you are paying by hits, by traffic, or by actual money transfer. You are paying the pornographer. And every time you pay them, you help them continue on in their trade more. And every time you continue the pornography trade, you are continuing the sex slave trade. You are continuing child abuse. You are continuing women getting hurt, men getting hurt, just for the enjoyment of someone who says, oh, I'm not hurting anybody. That's not true. If you want to look at all of the statistics, go ahead and look this up. All of the violent sex offenders, those people who actually go out and rape people or murder people and do all that stuff, they were all porn addicts, okay? This is not a victimless crime. It's not something you're just doing in the secrecy of your room and it doesn't affect anyone else. You're paying these people by participating in it, and you are hurting yourself and your future people in a relationship. So if you have a problem with this, and in case you've ever watched it, then you have a problem with it. This is like, oh, I only tried crack a few times, so I don't have a problem with it. No, once you've tried it, you have a problem with it. There is help, okay? There are a lot of things you can do to help yourself be free of this addiction just as much as you can be free of other addictions. There's several faith-based organizations that have links online. One of my favorites is XXX Church, and that is a good source. Covenant Eyes is a accountability software. They also have a lot of information on their website how to help you get past the addiction. If you have a temptation like this that you cannot control any longer, you have realized you are a slave to your addiction, you need to ask for help. You need to put accountability software on every single device you have access to, whether that's a computer or a phone, and you need to have those sites blocked. So you need a blocker and you need accountability so that if you do get tripped up into something, you have somebody in your life who cares about you, who's willing to help you to say, oh, dude, I see you screwed up again. Let's talk about it. Because just like drugs, just like alcohol, porn is used not for itself, but because it causes pain relieving chemicals to go on in your brain. Generally speaking, most people who are addicted to porn are addicted because they are using it to deal with their own internal pain. So if you know somebody who's a porn addict, you know what that tells you about them? It doesn't tell you anything about their sex drive. All it tells you is that they are hurting on the inside, and they are hurting a lot. This is not a small, light addiction. They are suffering severe pain. And you know what? You can't unsee things that you've seen before. You can't. The best thing you can do is stop. So if you need help, I'm going to post some links to try to give you guys a wide range of resources. If you have gotten sucked into this, I know boys and girls getting sucked into this at 8, 7, 6, 5. If you've gotten sucked into this, if you're already a hardcore addict, there's still help for you, okay? Your brain may have been changed. You may have a lot of work ahead of you to rewire your brain, but it's possible. And I want to make sure you know that. It is possible. The whole point in porn is to drag you into the gutter, but you were not meant to be a gutter creature. You weren't. Now, I need to mention the legal issues. Sexting, which is sending a sexual text or sexualized text or images of any kind between one person who is under the age of 18 and anyone else, is child pornography. So either asking for it or sending it is child pornography. Now, a lot of people might not think about that. Oh, it's just between me and him or me and her or whatever. No, once it's out there, it's out there. And you are doing something very illegal with a very big legal ramification. Child pornography is bad. And also, once you've sent something out there, people can use it to blackmail you. This is how a lot of people get sucked into the sex trafficking because the sex traffickers, they do this on purpose. They suck you in by getting you to send them stuff that shows your face or whatever so they can use it to blackmail you and make you send them more stuff, or even they begin to make you start showing up to be prostituted, to be pimped out. If you have been sucked in like this, just get out as quick as you can. It doesn't matter if people find out. You need to free yourself. And you need to not do this to anyone else or request it from anyone else. It's a big deal. Minors having sex is illegal, period. So the state of Florida says minors cannot consent. Cannot consent. So statutory rape, I think it got cut off a little bit here, bears felony charges in Florida. It is illegal for an adult who is 18 or older to have sex with someone who's under 18, even if the sex is supposedly consensual. It's called statutory rape. But in Florida, in some states, they say, well, I didn't know how old they were, so then I get off of it. No, that doesn't work in Florida. That is not a defense that you can make in Florida. Even if you don't know how old they are, don't have sex with them if you think they're under 18, okay? State law requires, in addition to all these fines and prison time, that people convicted of certain sexual crimes, including statutory rape, must register as sex offenders. Okay? Now, in Florida, there's the so-called Romeo and Juliet exemption for consensual sex when the minor was 13 to 17 years old and the defendant was no more than 4 years older. So, if that's true, the Romeo and Juliet exemption, all that does is prevent the offender, the older person, from not having to register as a sex offender for the rest of their life, and every single job they ever go to, they won't be able to get any job that has any requirements for working with children because they're a sex offender. Okay? That's all that does. However, you still get fines, you still get prison, you still get anything else they decide to throw at you. Lovely, right? And finally, I thought this was, interesting, although disturbing for anyone who might be having this as an issue. It is possible in Florida to be chemically castrated. That means they make you unable to have sex at all by putting chemicals in your body. And the court is allowed to impose this penalty for the first offense of sexual battery. And if there is one offense and then they have another offense after that, the court must impose this penalty in Florida. So let's say you have sex with someone and it follows the thing of sexual battery, and maybe you got a little rough and you didn't realize it or whatever, and then you do it again, you get chemically castrated in Florida. Florida don't play, okay? I was quite impressed with Florida's laws in these areas. It is not something you want to mess around with. So, that's something you need to know. If you are under 18, you cannot consent to sex, and there are very bad things that can happen to you if you get caught having sex with someone who is under 18. Okay? So that's the last thing I wanted to leave you guys with. Let me know if you have any questions on any of this, and glad that's done. Okay, thanks. Bye, guys.